So this is the second way you can sew the knot bag together. So what we're going to do to start with is put right sides of an outer and a lining and right sides of the other piece of the lining and the outer, and you can see that they're a mirror image of each other. So one's facing that way and one's the other. And what you're going to do is sew 1 centimetre down from the top of the long edge to where the notch is marked. So you can put a pin in just to remind you, and also pin it with the right sides to hold the rest of it together. So we'll sew 1 centimetre seam allowance down here, and the same on this one, and then 1 centimetre seam allowance down from the top of this edge round to here, so round the curve. And then we will do the same on this outer side here. That was in the shot there. So round here, stopping 1 centimetre at the top here, and then again from the notch that was on the pattern piece to 1 centimetre from the top. So we're sewing those to start with, those small sections, and then repeat the same on the other one as well. I've now sewn those bits, so you can see clearer if I turn it over here onto the green side where I'd put. So this one here, we did right sides together, and I've sewn this bit round the curve and down the side, and then the same on the other one that I did right sides together, starting 1 centimetre from the top, that one, and there. So now what we're going to do is open this out and put right sides together of the outer and the lining. So if I do the outer first, if you just make sure that the handles are sort of flopped towards the lining, so that when I then just match up the side seams there where the notches are, it should all just match up. We're going to sew around this outer edge first of all. So this is your outer one, so we don't need to leave a gap. We're just sewing 1 centimetre seam allowance all the way around. We'll pin that round, and as I said, just make sure the handles on both sides are sort of flopped towards the lining so you don't catch them when you're sewing around. So I've now sewn all the way round this curve here up to where the notches were, so that should join to where your stitching finished on the last bit. So now I'm going to flip the handles to the outer so that I can now sew the lining round the curve. So we're doing the same, but we're leaving a gap in the bottom there, about 8 centimetres, if you want to just do a mark. So you'll go from here to here, and then from here to here. So I've sewn around this curve now and left that gap. So we can now turn it the right way through this hole in the bottom. You just have to pull it through the actual main part of it now, and then it's a case of just easing through each of the handles. So it'll be the two long ones here that are tucked in on themselves, and then the 2 shorter ones here tucked in on themselves. So once they're all pulled out, you can sew the gap up in the lining and tuck that inside the bag, and then we've just got to sew the handles. So I give it a good iron as well. It's fiddly to turn out. So get that all pulled through and iron, and then we'll just sew these raw edges at the top. So I've turned it all through. I've sewn the gap in the lining. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to sew right sides together here of the outer short edge of the handle. So the reason I left a centimetre there was so that I could fold away the lining and sew a centimetre seam allowance to join it along here. So I'll do that now. So just to show you there, I've folded in the raw edges so that when I sew a centimetre seam allowance, it stitches those seam allowances down as well. So I've machined along here, so you can see from this side, it's neatly sewn together. So now what I've got to do on this side is actually tuck in the raw edge of one of the lining pieces there, and then lay over the other part, turn under the raw edge, and then what you can do is either hand slip stitch that or turn it to the machine and stitch it down to close that gap closed there. Then what we'll do is do the same for the short strap. So you'll pull apart your outer fabric on the short side of the strap, and we'll sew across that top edge there, keeping out the lining part. So I've done the same there. You can see I've stitched that now of the other short edge, and I can do the same there now, where I'll tuck in one of the raw edges, fold the other one over the top, and fold in the raw edge, and either hand slip stitch it, tuck in all those raw frayed edges, or trim them down. So either hand slip stitch it or carefully top stitch that on the machine. So I've just tucked those raw edges in there and slip stitched those. I decided to do, so not actually top stitch, but that is an option. So that's the knot bag finished there, and here I've got the version that did in the last session as well. So there's two slightly different ways to make them. There's the version 1 there and version 2, but the finished result is the same.